What if I told you I finally found the perfect camera? The absolute sweet spot, the perfect middle ground between image quality on the one side and character and soul on the other. Also between specs, technology on the one side and looks, feel, and character as far as body design. And it's a camera I've owned before. Boys, welcome to 1,000 Words. My name is Radu. I'm a street photographer from Romania, and I do mean boys because 99.8% of my lifetime audience has basically always been male. So I guess this makes this a great, huge, big sausage fest. I've switched back to Fuji. Look what I got here, boys. What is this? This is the Fujifilm X-T3 and the 23mm f2. The black Fuji, the one I've always wanted, and I've purchased it again. I've sold everything. I've sold everything vintage. This is the entirety of my photographic equipment right now. With the exception of that, the Sony ZV-1, which is basically my video camera, so that doesn't count since I'm basically a stills person. This is everything I own as far as photographic equipment, and it feels rather great. I think I owe you guys an explanation, especially seeing how a bit over a year ago, it was me here, or rather not here, but here on the channel that I said I would never be going back to Fuji, never again Fuji, good riddance, goodbye, and so long, never again. The same me, well actually, to spoil things, I do want to say that I've decided to give Fujifilm another try. The wife. I was saying, I decided to give Fujifilm another go for two main reasons. First, that I probably succumbed to a bit of a rage quit moment when I had three bodies malfunction, or rather slightly malfunction, because there was nothing critical. Buttons started acting up on them, and three bodies in a span of 8 months kind of got on my nerves. So instead of just sending in my X-T3 to be fixed, I just rage quit on Fuji and defaulted back to Sony. And in hindsight, I should have probably just did the adult thing and repair my stuff. And I think I would still be with Fuji had I done that. Instead, I decided to sell everything in a fit of rage, so there's that. The second reason why I've decided to go back to Fuji is because of the magic sauce that's inside these absolutely charming pieces of photographic equipment. Now, before getting in depth into both of these subjects, I want to offer you a bit of context and backstory because I think it will prove important to know my history with cameras and how it appears that my love for cameras has diminished inversely proportional to their technical specs. The better the camera, the less I seemed to enjoy them. So then, I first started with photography with actual proper photographic equipment in 2016 because photography, it's something that started interesting me quite a few years prior to that when I was shooting smartphone photography. But let's start with actual cameras. My first one was the Canon 760D. I didn't really like that camera. I had it for a couple of years, out of which a whole year is a period of time I didn't know photography at all, so probably doesn't even count. And that first year was me just getting to grips with actually using a camera, real camera. So while this being neither here nor there, I didn't enjoy using that 760D. Sure, it was exciting to buy my first DSLR, but say for that, the camera didn't speak to me. Then I upgraded to the Sony a6000, and it's there that I first felt the exhilarating thrill of a camera you click with, a camera you enjoy owning and shooting. I absolutely adored that camera, and I used it for a good few years before doing what one usually does, following the logical progression of events and deciding to upgrade to full frame. I got the A7R, and sure enough, at first I was quite enthusiastic about my upgrade to full frame, but that enthusiasm seemed to quickly fade away. I thought I needed the next model, so I got the A7R too. Sure enough, for a short while, I was enthusiastic again about my upgrade and purchase, but very shortly thereafter, I start feeling like I wasn't satisfied with it. Now, silly me, I forgot to present to you my beverage of choice for this video, which is the channel regular Neumarkt. Cheers, fellas. Enthusiasm got the better of me, and I started this video without the traditional sip. This will be remedied right now. Cold, bitter, fresh, and really hoppy. Man, this is pretty good beer. I was saying how the enthusiasm of getting the A7R2 faded rather quickly, and I started feeling a disconnect, feeling like I was searching for something. And this entire video is a story about searching, about a quest to find an elusive je ne sais quoi, which I eventually started saying quoi? I eventually do find out what it was, but hold this thought because this conclusion comes right at the end of this. I didn't really know what I was missing, but something was lackluster in my experience. And this is a key word, experience, because the A7R2 is much better than the A7R, and the A7R, even if solely for being full frame, is much better than the A6000, which itself was a pretty fantastic crop sensor camera, especially for the price and especially for its generation. So then, after owning the A7R2 for a while, and throughout this entire period of time, I was shooting vintage manual glass, and I did all right. However, as it happens, I started seeing Fujifilm content on YouTube, and you see a video, you see two, you see three, you see a few of them. It's then where the algorithm grabs you, and grab me it did, because it started showing me Fujifilm content. So then I saw these cameras I knew very little about prior to seeing them on YouTube. I even thought Fujifilm was something that they did back then, and those really compact point and shoots that grandmas use. And I saw how beautiful they were. I saw the brilliant images they made. I saw how people loved them. I saw the community around Fujifilm, and I fell for it. I fell for the mirage. This community that seemed to love their cameras like none other. I had never, and have never since, found people loving their cameras as much as Fuji people do. Sure enough, you can call them fanboys, and that could very well partly be true. But I wanted some of that. So I eventually sold as much as I could of my gear in order to finance a Fujifilm. So I got the X-T2. And boy, oh boy, did that catch me by surprise. I was absolutely love-struck, enamored, charmed. Got that camera about a week or two before my daughter being born. So I used it through arguably the most important time of my life. And I've shot what are arguably the most important images I have ever made. Images that are extremely dear to me. And I very fondly remember using this camera at my in-laws, where we went after my wife gave birth, and lived with them for a week or two before going back to our place. So I very vividly and fondly remember using the Fuji DX-T2, shooting family around, the birth of my daughter. So all that serves to create an air of charm and magic. And I loved the X-T2 to bits. Everything they said was true and then more. Every fanboy turned out to be completely right in my mind because I absolutely adore the X-T2. However, I found it slightly lackluster in a few key areas, and how it usually goes, I decided to upgrade to the X-T3. I wanted a bit better autofocus, I wanted a bit better viewfinder, I wanted a bit faster operation in general, so I found used but pristine, basically X-T3, locally. I was able to go check it out and buy it, and that even heightened my enthusiasm for Fujifilm. I should say that part of the reason why I decided to ditch my X-T2 was the fact that the shutter button had begun feeling somewhat mushy. I talked about this at length in other videos on the channel, but you know how it has two stages, the first where it acquires focus and the second where it actually triggers, and they're very noticeably separated mechanically. There's feedback you can feel when you reach the first stage, and that first stage completely went away. Probably something mechanically went wrong there. Sure enough, it worked, but the shutter button felt kind of mushy, so I went online and I saw that it's a bit of an issue, and a known issue at that with Fuji cameras. So, well, my wife can certainly deal with stuff like this. It's not something I can easily accommodate. I really like, while I don't mind a bit of wear and tear on the actual bodies, I do like all the features to be there. I do want a fully functional camera. And I should mention, before searching for the X-T3, I had purchased another X-T2 just with the intention of selling to MPB because I got it for really cheap and I was standing to make a significant profit with it had I sold it to MPB. So, and I did sell it, but not before using it for a bit. And eventually I ended up selling my first X-T2 and keeping this second X-T2, which very promptly started developing yet another issue with the shutter button, that of a sticky shutter button. It started to grab on something if you didn't press it just right. So that was Fujifilm body number 2 that had buttons malfunction on me. That ended up staying with my wife for a while I upgraded to the X-T3. So I was really happy with the X-T3 for a good few months, not many, before it decided to malfunction again. So this is turning out to be quite long, but hey, welcome to the ride. This is story time. Just to keep things short, because I talked about this as well in other videos, the on-off buttons suddenly didn't turn the camera on again. I had to flick it several times, 6-7 times, and press the shutter button to wake it from a deep slumber, which it had appeared to go into for unknown reasons, and that was frustrating because it meant me missing out on shots. This is the moment where I went into a bit of a rage quit moment and sold everything, and I defaulted back to Sony. I knew I didn't like Canon mirrorless. I knew Nikon Z cameras were at their early stages, let's say. I knew they were kind of expensive. I knew they were kind of out of my budget. So I went back to Sony, back to vintage lenses. So I got the A7R III. However, the experience I had shooting Fuji for about 8 months meant I had gotten a good taste of autofocus. So going back to Sony and vintage manual lenses meant I very quickly started to miss autofocus. You know this story. I talked about this at length as well. It was during that photography workshop at the Gabud monastery where I really decided manual focus was holding back and I would go to shoot autofocus. So I did. I sold everything vintage, bought autofocus lenses, and then I kind of solved one problem, that of being slow with manual focus, but created another problem because the combination of native Sony glass and the high resolution 42 megapixel sensor of the A7R3 meant images came out rather clinical and really too clean for my taste, sterile and soulless. So what was I to think? Vintage lenses must be the solution. But the experience with Sony and autofocus lenses, and we all know Sony autofocus is basically class leading, only further solidified my realization that I was indeed missing out on autofocus by using manual glass. And it's where I started to feel like I was in a bit of a conundrum. On the one hand, autofocus on Sony means images that I started disliking because they were too clean, too soulless. So on the other hand then, solving this problem, that of clean, sterile images, meant for slow operation and missing out due to manual focus. On the other hand, I had apparently changed a bit meanwhile, because it would seem like I have rather outgrown a stage of my becoming as a photographer where I valued things like bokeh and all those aberrations much more than I do now. In the past, that was basically most of what I enjoyed about vintage lenses. Bokeh, lots of it, because their availability and low cost meant I could afford f1.4 glass, which meant for really shallow depth of field, good blur, pretty blur, bokeh balls up the wazoo, so I was a proper bokeh whore. I also enjoyed halation and aberrations and softness and highlight glow and all of that. But having used Fuji in the past and Sony and their native glass more recently also meant I had gotten a taste of an actual clean image. So then, on my last return to Sony and vintage glass, which was just a few months ago, I even made that very dramatic video where I talk in silhouette and whatnot about Linux and vintage lenses. I reiterated what I thought was what I loved about vintage lenses. But in hindsight, I only did that because it's what I thought I enjoyed. Because promptly after switching back to vintage lenses, I started feeling like that amount of bokeh didn't really do it for me anymore. I started looking at my images and felt like, maybe there's a bit too much softness. Maybe there's a bit too much halation. Maybe the image is a bit too unclear. So how do I solve that? Stop it down. But then again, if you stop a vintage lens down, it practically looks more and more like modern glass. So then what's the point of it anyway? But there was still the issue of manual focus, which, while on the one side, in the past, I had thought it allowed me a better connection to my photographic endeavor, in recent times, it seemed like it made me more anxious, because being slower and having to take my time with focusing on all that meant I spent more time than I would otherwise like in my scenes. And I realized this after several photo walks where I basically went home with nothing, for the simple reason of not having enough courage to take the camera to my eye and take actual photos. So I went back with photos of corners and walls and branches and leaves and flowers and everything that's not human, because I started developing a bit of anxiety. And this is really kind of rather weird, because I've been doing this for close to a decade, if we're counting my time shooting phones, because I think that counts. I did that for a good few years. So one would expect to develop more courage, but it would seem like it's not always how you expect things to work. They don't usually play out exactly like you expect them to. So it would appear I'm in a period of time where I have less courage than I used to a few years back. So that means, together with the fact that you're slow with manual focus, that means I on and on and on again, photo walk after photo walk, I went home with basically nothing. So it's where I started thinking, on the one hand, I'm kind of thinking, perhaps I do need autofocus. On the other hand, I'm starting thinking, perhaps I've outgrown my bokeh horror phase, and perhaps I want images that are slightly cleaner, that have a slight edge, slightly more sharp, slightly better resolution. But it still remains true that the combination of a full-frame sensor and modern native glass is too much for me. And on the other hand, a combination of vintage lens with its slow manual focus, and it's really by now a bit unacceptable as far as wide open performance, meant I had to find something that was in between. So this is basically where this comes in. The sweet spot, the Goldilocks zone, the perfect compromise, the middle ground. On the one hand, as far as technology goes, the X-T3 is splendid. It's a superb machine. While not Sony level, autofocus is practically great, with two caveats, and I will be making a video where I talk about this at length in the future, but I want to very briefly mention two caveats right now. Autofocus continuous and face/eye detection are two modes that are more trouble than they're worth. I'll leave things at that, which means I use this without face detection and eye detection in autofocus single, sometimes continuous, but more on this in another video. Other than this, I find this a joy to use as far as technology, a lot of customization, a lot of quality of life features, extremely good as far as specs and technology. Then there's looks, feel, experience, and my relationship with this camera. I adore this as well. I want you to notice that there's basically like a curve. Spec-wise, I kept upgrading. However, it's inversely proportional to my love of the camera. Experience-wise, it was quite the opposite. The A6000 was what I loved most. The A7R III, while on paper the best camera I've ever owned, in actual practice, it's the camera I've loved least. By far, no contest. I could never actually develop a relationship with that camera. I never really felt like I enjoyed owning it and using it. It felt like a soulless computer that happened to make images, which is quite the opposite in this regard to the X-T3. I shit you not. I feel like I could hug this. And while I realize I'm getting slightly pathetic here, it is a camera that has reminded me how it is to be joyous and happy with photography and photographic equipment again. I am absolutely in love with this camera. Also, the lens, the 23 f2, is the perfect middle ground between good, fast, silent autofocus, weather-built body, metal chassis, aperture ring, and image quality that's just slightly soft at f2, so that it provides me for that look that I want, that is gentle and elegant and slightly soft while having great resolving power, really brilliant sharpness otherwise. Push it to f5.6, it's absolutely pristine. It's razor sharp, really remarkable. I'm enthusiastic about photography again. And I think it's important because the thing about these pieces of equipment, the way I practice photography, they're meant to be more than just stupid black boxes that take pictures. I do want to stress this point. Experience matters a lot. And images themselves are at the perfect middle ground between clean with autofocus and soft with manual focus. They're right there in the Goldilocks zone. There's autofocus, which allows me to be quick and prompt about it. There's also a fair bit of softness when I need it at wide open, which makes for images that don't have that razor sharp, sterile, clinical edge. Very briefly, I want to talk about recent experience I had with the Olympus Pen F. Now, there was a bit of time where I owned nothing, no camera at all, because I had sold my Nicors, the 51.4 and the 85 a few weeks back, in preparation for making the switch. Then I sent my A7R III and my last remaining autofocus lens, the 40G, to MPB, and that leaves us with my Konica kit, the Auto Reflex T3, with 4 lenses, the 28 3.5, the 40 1.8, the 50 1.4, and the 57 1.4. That has also recently sold on eBay, so that meant I was without a camera for about 2 weeks. When that happens, when I'm between systems like that, I usually turn to Paul, good friend, and I asked to borrow his Olympus Pen F. It's my transition camera. It's a camera I've always loved to use. It's a camera I found to be charming in use up until getting home and looking at the images. While serviceable, sure enough, no doubt about that, it proves to be quite lackluster when it comes to low light performance, and I don't actually mind noise all that much. What I do mind is the fact that images have their harshest digital look when shot in low light. They look really not much different from something this takes, my phone. And while, again, I do want to stress this, it's not about the noise. I don't care two shits about grain. I can shoot it at max ISO all night. I don't care. What I do care is the utter lack of depth in the images, the fact that they look flat and digital. It's physics, it's optics. And I've gotten quite a bit of hate on this subject when I talked about the Pen F. But I do stand by my words. A small sensor will make for images that are rather flat and very digital looking. Sure enough, during daytime, it's got beautiful colors and it's not all that bad. I've shot with it, like 2 weeks? We had Easter and I visited my mom and my in-laws and I went to church a lot and a lot of shooting at home. And I'm mentioning this because it only further served to prove a point in my mind. The experience is at least half of it. The connection with the camera, the way you feel about it, the way it feels in hand. I absolutely had a blast using the Pen F. Were it not for the images it makes at night, that could very well be my main camera. However, that together with its rather sloppy autofocus, which I eventually learned to get around of and make do with, but still, I wanted something a bit better, especially when it comes to images. My time with the Pen F only further served to demonstrate the value of a camera you love holding, owning, using, because that's actually what makes you do it in the first place. Do it. Do it. So I did it. I got the Fujifilm X-T3. So that's the great extent of my photo kit right now. Very briefly, an update regarding my channel, some future plans. Obviously enough, this means no more vintage lens reviews. Sorry to those that I disappoint, but it is what it is. Fickle. Thy name is human. Apparently this is a channel where I eat my own words a lot. I do things I say I never do, but hey, kind of makes me wonder, why do you guys even watch this? Why do you guys even care what I have to say? Is it for the beer? Is it for the beard? No matter the reason, I want to thank you. And no more vintage lens reviews, no more Sony, and probably quite a few videos in the future where I gush about the X-T3, because boy oh boy, there's reason to gush. It's a beautiful camera that I love. What else? What else? It's a video where I let you know I'm a Fujifilm fanboy again. Take that for what it's worth. Feel free to unsubscribe. Welcome to those of you that have just subscribed, and don't put money on it. But I think this time I'm in it for the long haul. This time it seems like I've did it with a proper, mature attitude after having understood quite a few things about myself. And while I did say the very same thing a few months ago when I did my vintage lenses and Linux video, here I am now dropping vintage lenses altogether. But I guess, if anything, that is to show the most important thing I have for you guys that watch me is my absolute honesty. I don't care how much I have to eat my own words and how many times I have to admit I was wrong. I thought I understood, and I understood shit. I don't care. I will always, and I promise you this, I will always be honest, transparent, and upfront about it, because this is basically like a journal for me. This is like a diary. This is my photographic journey. And I don't think anything says I appreciate you more than being honest with you, more than having the courage to admit vulnerability when it turns out I was wrong, I made the wrong choices. So why do I say that this time it feels like it's for good? First of all, because some searches seem to have had natural and healthy closure. My search for image quality seemed to have landed in a natural sweet spot, a very natural middle ground and Goldilocks zone between image quality and character. Also, the fact that I do need autofocus and I'm not blindly sticking to tools that don't serve me as good as they should just because I want to be recognized as a manual lens shooter. Sure, I will try manual lenses again in the future. One of the brilliant things about the X-mount is the availability of lenses, and boy oh boy do the Chinese make some good, interesting lenses. There's a 33 f0.95 that's really affordable, even new in shops. So yeah, I will at one point try to use some manual glass on Fuji, but for the time being, especially for what I deem important, basically for my street photography, I will stick to manual focus. Now, before I wrap things up, very briefly about plans for the future. Let's try and make this 1 hour to alienate all three of you that are still watching. Push you into unsubscribing because this crazy fellow just talks out of his ass for an hour. Yeah, plans for the future. I intend to make this into a one camera, one lens challenge where I shoot only this combo for, let's say, a few months, maybe 3 months. Partly because I've been binge spending on photo gear recently and I don't want to do that anymore. And also partly because I really do want to get to know this focal length. It's a focal length 35 equivalent, which I've stupidly mostly avoided up until now, but I want to give it a proper shot. There is an important caveat here. I do intend to purchase the Sirui 56mm f1.2 because I have to do a few portrait shoots, and yeah, those are commitments I made before and I don't want to break them. I have to do that. But other than that, 85 is not even something I usually enjoy shooting a lot, so that's just very pragmatically chosen so I can fulfill these commitments of mine. But other than that, I intend to use this basically like X100 alternative. It's a 35mm and I'll use this as a fixed lens. This should also probably make my wife a bit happier because, as I said, I've been spending a lot recently. That kind of wraps things up. Thank you for watching. Really. No, I mean it. Thank you. Thank you for sticking with me. That has been all. I have been Radu, back to Fujifilm, yet again a Fuji fanboy. This has been 1,000 words. Until next time, farewell. Fuji.